This is a Geek Leader. Hey guys, welcome to episode 166 of Geek Leader Podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda, and special thanks to Private Internet Access. I've been a customer of Private Internet Access for 3 years now, and I love this service. I was at a security conference a few years back, and I connected to the hotel Wi-Fi, and immediately my endpoint protection software started alerting me that I was being attempted to be hacked, and I guess you could expect that from a security conference. But anyway, I launched my VPN from Private Internet Access, and all the attempts just stopped. My data and the internet connection is now secure with Private Internet Access, and I've been using their service again for 3 years, and I love it. I love the fact that you can choose different geographical locations, so you can test things like how your DNS is resolving and use it for many different reasons. But that's one definite use case for the different geolocations that you can choose with Private Internet Access. And you can get your VPN starting at $3.33 per month. Yes, that's right, $3.33 per month by going to geekleader.com/VPN. All right, Geek Leaders. Today on the show, I've got Scott DeLuzio, and he is a WordPress plugin developer through his company Amplify Plugins. He also hosts a podcast called Drive On Podcast, and he is an Army veteran, which is one of the things that you guys, if you have listened to any number of episodes of the show, I've had a lot of military veterans on because I think it's a very interesting way for us to learn about leadership and to learn some of the discipline that comes in from the military. So I definitely want to talk about that and talk about some of the things that Scott has learned. So with all that being said, Scott, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, John. And thanks for the great intro as well. So like you said, my company Amplify Plugins, we build WordPress plugins, primarily e-commerce related plugins. So things that enhance WooCommerce and other e-commerce related add-ons for WordPress sites is our primary goal. We have a couple other plugins that are not e-commerce focused, but the bulk of it is e-commerce. Which has been proving in the recent months to be something that people are turning to more and more, especially with the lockdowns and everything that have been happening with local businesses being closed down and things like that. They're turning more and more to e-commerce. So we've been very fortunate that we've been able to help out some of these companies that may otherwise have no way of generating income. So that's something that we didn't really see coming, but it's we're glad that we're here to be able to support those types of companies.
Yeah, WooCommerce has been around for a while. I remember, gosh, probably 7 years ago, working on a website. Maybe it was a little less than that, where we set up a WooCommerce site for them. And I've done some things with WooCommerce recently. For a friend of mine, he was selling some products online, and we used WooCommerce because it was really easy to just kind of spin up. What do your plugins do to kind of build on that?
Yeah, so one of our more popular ones is called Quick Checkout, and that essentially acts like the buy now button in Amazon. If you're familiar with that, I know a lot of people shop on Amazon. So, when you click on that buy now button on Amazon, it basically pops up the checkout form, and you just kind of basically confirm your details are correct that are in there, and then you click checkout and it's done. You don't have to go to the cart and change the quantities or go to a separate checkout page. It just basically is a pop-up type thing that opens up the cart for you. And if you're logged into your account, all of that information is already pre-filled in, and it makes it a lot quicker, and it increases conversions because of that. That way people aren't chasing after their kids or something and forgetting that they were in the middle of trying to buy something or whatever, and or second guessing themselves and that type of thing. They can make the purchase and it converts a little bit better. We have another one called conditional checkout fields, which so if you're for example, if you're selling access to a course or tickets to an event or something like that, and you might need some additional information before the customer finishes their checkout. Based on the products that are in the customer's cart, it'll pop up a few extra fields that the people can enter in. So if they're registering for an event and you have like a meal choice, for example, like if you're serving a dinner or something like that, you can have that pop up on the checkout page. They can select their meal choice or whatever the questions are that you might have for them. So So those are two of our more popular plugins. We have several others, but
Cool.
those are the more popular ones.
So let's take a step back in time, and how did you get to this point in your career? What was your life like? And kind of, I mentioned at the beginning that you were an Army veteran. So can we go way back to why you joined the military, what that service was like, and kind of how that led into what you're doing now?
Yeah, sure. I think a lot of people who probably are around my age, we lived through the 9/11 era, and I was in college at the time studying accounting during 9/11, and I had a strong desire to serve my country. I saw that our country was in need, and I really wanted to do something to help out. I also was kind of wrestling with the fact that, I was in college. I was, about roughly halfway through college at that point, and I didn't want to just throw that all away. All of that education. My parents were helping, get me through college and all that kind of stuff. So I didn't want to throw that away either. So I made a decision that I was going to finish college, and then going to reassess where things were, in terms of the climate of the wars and everything else that was going on at that point. So I did that. I finished college. I started working at a CPA firm because I did graduate with an accounting degree. And I decided to join the National Guard. So that way it was sort of a best of both worlds situation where I could continue working my civilian job, but also serve in the military as well. And when I did that, it was at a time period when the Army recruiting numbers were at an all-time low, and it sort of angered me a little bit. I was like, there's a need out there. We need soldiers, and then I looked at myself like, well, why can't I do this? I'm young enough. I'm fit enough. Why shouldn't I be the one who signs up and joins the military as well? So I did that. Went through training and everything. Came back and continued working the job that I was working, the civilian job. A lot of people don't really realize it, but your civilian job by law is required to be kept for you if you are to go away to military service like that. So I still had my job when I came back and things like that. So that's kind of where I came from in terms of like why I joined the military and everything. Fast forward a few years and in about 5 years later, I ended up being deployed to Afghanistan. This was in 2010. And so that kind of rounded out my my service that got me to the point where I felt, all those years earlier where I was doing something to help the country. And, I was fighting the war that hadn't even started when, 9/11 had taken place. But I was fighting in that war as an infantry soldier. And that's kind of where all of that took place.
So when you came back from Afghanistan, you said your job was held for you, right? So did you go right back into accounting, or did you not like that, or did you want to do something totally different because of your experiences, or what was that?
Yeah. So when I came back, so my brother was overseas with us at the same time, and he was unfortunately he didn't make it home. He was killed in action in Afghanistan, and when I came home, it was very hard for me to find like meaning and sense of purpose in the work that I was doing. Just crunching numbers all day just was not very meaningful to me. And so I wanted to find a change with that. And so I ended up leaving the company that I was working for at the time, and I joined my father's consulting company. And I was doing a lot of the technology side of things. I redid their website. I handled a lot of the IT, the tech support type stuff. A lot of the people getting their computers set up and their emails and everything else that went along with that. I was doing that, and I found that I really enjoyed the technology side of things. I was doing other things too, some marketing type stuff and things like that. That wasn't quite as interesting to me, but the technology side of things was really interesting to me. And so I did that for a little while, working for him. And in the meantime, I had also kind of on the side set up an e-commerce site where I was selling things on the side. It wasn't a huge project that I was working on there, but it was something that just kind of piqued my interest and got me involved a little bit of writing some code and things to kind of get the website that I was selling on to work the way I wanted it to. Um, and that really helped plant that seed to get me to kind of move on to the technology world. So after I finished working with my father at his consulting company, I started my own website design agency where I would, build websites for local clients and things like that. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it. I really enjoyed, seeing the different ways that people were using their websites, for marketing their businesses and the different things like that. The thing that I didn't like about it was the difficulties that you face when you're working with clients. When you have a customer who comes to you and says, "Hey, I want this website," and then you do the back and forth to figure out what it is that they want, and they kind of disappear for a little while, and it's a difficult game to play there, and that part of it I really didn't enjoy. But when I was doing the agency work, I was building some plugins on the side to basically scratch my own itch. There were little things that I found that there wasn't really a good plugin out there that did what I wanted it to do. There might be something out there that did maybe 70% of what I wanted it to do, but it didn't quite get all the way there. Or there might be a third-party service that did something, but it was either too expensive or just wasn't quite what I was looking for. So I started building things on my own. And I thought to myself that if I'm sitting here needing these things, there's probably somebody else out there who needs these things as well. And so I decided to just throw up some websites to start selling these products. And to my surprise, they actually started selling pretty well with zero marketing effort other than putting up a website. They started selling okay on their own. And so after I was getting more and more fed up with the agency work and the type of work that I was doing, I decided, if I actually put some time and effort into these plugins and actually market them and get the word out there about them, I might actually be able to make a living off of this and do pretty well with it. So this was about 3 years ago, and I decided that the client that I was working on at that time, that would be the last client I would take. And I just made a hard line there, and I said, I'm just not going to take any more clients. I'm going to try this for 6 months, see how it goes, and if it doesn't work out, then I'll go back to the agency work, even though it's not exactly what I want. At least I was making a pretty decent income that way. So I gave myself 6 months, and things really started picking up from there. And I haven't really looked back since then. So that's kind of how I got into the. It's kind of a long, convoluted way to get into the technology world, but that was my journey. And
it's actually a very common journey, believe it or not. I know, like, even for me, I look back on my history. In college I was a business major, and then switched to mechanic, got my MBA, and then my first job was in marketing, believe it or not. But this is back in the 90s, and not a whole lot of people knew a lot about technology and using computers, but I loved them, and I was building, learning HTML and, C++ just for fun.
Right.
And I ended up, my boss always had computer problems, so she ended up moving me over to work in IT. So somehow I ended up, being a PC tech guy for a little while. So I decided to go back, get my master's of software development, and go that route. But yeah, it happens to a lot of people. And I know the agency work, I did that for a while. Me and two other fraternity brothers, we started a company doing websites and web hosting back in 1999. And we did that for 7 years. And it's one of those things where everybody's got your phone number and your cell phone, and they're going to call you whether you're on vacation or whatever. And then when someone wants a new website, they want you to build a website, but they don't want to give you the content because they don't know how to write the content. And they can't approve anything because they're not really sure. It's not exactly what they want, but it's kind of what they want. It's just, it drove me crazy too. I totally get it.
Yeah, exactly.
So when you started working on these plugins and building, you said they kind of sold okay by themselves without having to do much marketing. What kind of marketing did you have to do when you decided to go all in on this?
Yeah, when I started going all in, it was more just getting the word out about them. Previously I made a website that had some content on it, really not a whole lot, other than, brief descriptions of what the products were and that type of thing. But I hadn't really advertise them, or I hadn't told too many people about them. It was more me trying to get out there and sell websites, because that was the primary focus of my business. So now well, not now because of all the lockdowns and everything with the coronavirus that's going on. But I had been going to conferences and meeting other people who have agencies where they're building sites for clients, and just letting them know that, like, these are the plugins that I have. This is what I'm selling, and so that way when they have their clients that are needing that type of thing, they can come to me to get that type of plugin for those sites. And so it was really just getting out there and meeting people and getting the word out there about the types of stuff that I was selling. And that's what really, I think, started changing things. I had done some other, content marketing and, some paid advertising and stuff like that, but that didn't seem to work quite as well. I don't think anyway. So, but the relationships that you form when you start to become friends with some of these people who are in those positions where they can influence, what plugins are being used and that type of things in their environment, that tends to make a little bit of a difference.
Yeah. So, the totally unrelated question, but I go to I used to go to a good bit of conferences and speak at them and things like that. And I would always go by and talk to all the vendors and all the booths there. But one thing, what is the return on that? Is that a good return? Does that seem to be a good way? I mean, I guess it is, because people continually sponsor these conferences and.
Yeah. Well, as far as the conferences go, I sponsored one once a while ago, and I didn't really see a return on that one-time investment. And the people who do it, I think, to be successful, you need to do it often and be in front of people enough. It's all the time. You basically have to sponsor all of the conferences and have people at all of the conferences all of the time, and do it year after year after year. And that's when you start to see a return, is not after that one-off, one weekend conference where people are showing up, maybe a couple hundred people show up to, it's something where you do that one year after year after year, or several conferences year after year after year. But for me, it was, I did a lot of speaking at these conferences, and so I basically had a captive audience for 45 minutes or whatever the time was, where not that I was plugging my products or what I was selling to those people, but they got to know who I was.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that a lot of people would come up to me afterwards and talk to me as if they knew me. I'd never met these people before sometimes, but they would come up and talk to me just as if they knew me, because quite frankly, and from their perspective, they did sort of know me because I had just been talking to them for 45 minutes. And so that made the conversations a whole lot easier with some of these agency owners, or decision makers, anyways, where we can have those conversations and get into touch with each other, as opposed to just setting up a booth with your logo sitting over a table, or something like that, and handing out some swag that people don't end up using. That to me seemed to have a much better result, for me anyways. And I'm a small company, so it's not like I have a ton of people that I could send out to all these conferences all over the country, all over the world even. So for me, that's what got me the most bang for my buck. It was, nothing more than a flight in some cases, and, a couple nights in a hotel, for being at these conferences. And it tend to work out pretty well to get that reach out there and meet a lot of people.
Yeah, and if you can ever get on the speaking circuit where you're speaking at these conferences, then a lot of times the flight and hotel are paid for. So
right, yeah, I've had a few of those as well. Some of them were smaller conferences; they just didn't have the budget for it. But in those cases, it wasn't it wasn't too far too expensive or anything like that. So, but yeah, there's some that also had everything was covered for you, and that was nice as well.
So I want to go back to your time overseas in the war, being on the infantry. That seems like a super scary place to be.
Yeah, it could be at times. Sometimes it was, quiet and calm, and things weren't really all that scary. But there's also that kind of looming threat of, you don't know when things could go haywire. Someone could start launching mortars into your base, and you really don't have much warning on that, and so that could happen at any time. When I previously had mentioned my brother was killed overseas. We were not stationed together. We were both in Afghanistan, but we were in different units in different parts of the country. We were roughly 90 to 100 miles or so away from each other at the time that he was killed. But I was out on another mission, and we were patrolling in a village, and I had gotten a call on the radio that the commander that was looking for me during this mission on the same day that my brother was killed. And usually, if you know anything about the chain of command, like I wasn't super high ranking or anything. I was a sergeant in the Army, and if the commander's looking for you specifically, it's either something really, really good happened or something really, really bad happened. And I didn't do anything extraordinarily well, like I did my job, but nothing extraordinarily well happened. And so I immediately started, going over in my head all the things that could have gone wrong, and what did I do wrong? What got screwed up? And when I finally caught up with him, he sat me down and told me about how my brother was killed. And so, obviously, like anybody else, a very emotional situation, and it just wasn't a great situation for me at that time. And within a matter of a few minutes after finding out that my brother was killed, our unit started getting attacked by the enemy, and so it was just a few minutes after finding this out. So I really had almost no time to grieve at all before having to kind of go back into Army mode and lead my soldiers. I had a squad of soldiers that I had to lead, and direct their fire, make sure that they were in the right position to protect our position, make sure that they had sufficient ammunition and other things that they needed. That was my job. So one of the things, I know a lot of things that you talk about on this podcast is kind of from a leadership perspective, but one of the things that I sort of had to learn on the fly almost is that you sort of have to put your personal issues sometimes to the side and try to figure out what the situation is that you're in, and deal with that situation, and not let your personal issues, your own personal emotions get in the way. I still had a job to do, and if I couldn't do that job well or correctly, other people could have died, and that would have to me that would have been devastating, because if I couldn't get my own mind right, and I end up letting down this squad or other soldiers, if I end up letting them down because I couldn't get my mind right, then that would be a disaster. That would be a terrible situation. I don't know that I would have been able to forgive myself for that. So, at the time I was angry, I was sad, I was, all the emotions you could possibly imagine, were flowing through me. But, at the same time, I still had people to lead, and I couldn't just let them, be leaderless and just running around with no direction, and that would have gotten someone hurt or killed at that point, and that's just, to me, unacceptable. I think to pretty much everyone who would be in my shoes, that would be an unacceptable outcome. So that's one of the kind of lessons learned that I had from that deployment.
So your brother's name was Stephen, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So when you heard the news, you said you came under attack shortly after that. Did they give you like was he attacked, or were they out or on a mission or something? Or
They really didn't at the time. They didn't know what had happened. They knew that two soldiers were killed at some point, and they didn't know which one was which. They knew one was shot and one had gotten hit with an RPG, rocket propelled grenade,
Mhm.
and they knew that there were two soldiers who were killed, but they didn't know which one was which or who was what. My brother was the one who was shot, and he was killed almost instantly when they were attacked. They were out on a mission on a patrol. He was walking around, and they just got ambushed, and he was shot and killed pretty much instantly.
Man, I hate to hear that.
Yeah.
So when did that pretty much end your deployment, or did you finish out your time and then come back home, or
Yeah,
what is?
that pretty much ended it for me.
Yeah.
When that happened, my commander said that he was calling in for helicopters to take me and a couple other wounded soldiers off of the mountain that we were on, and so that he was basically saying, get out of here. You're not going to be much use to us at this point. Like go take care of your affairs and take care of your family and that type of stuff. And so I probably had record speed for getting out of Afghanistan, unless you were some high-ranking brass or something like that. But I went from being on top of a mountain at 3 o'clock in the afternoon one night to the next morning being on a plane out of Afghanistan to Kuwait, which is pretty fast in terms of getting out, and unless it's a medevac or you're some high-ranking official or something like that.
So when you got back, that's when you kind of realized that you wanted to do something more with your life.
Yeah, I was very dissatisfied with the work that I was doing. My boss at the time, my deployment was supposed to go through November of that year, and I came home late August of that year. So my boss told me after I had gotten home, he said, "Look, I wasn't planning on having you back until November anyway. So take the time, be home with your family, do what you need to do, and then your job will be here when you get back," which was super nice of him. He didn't have to do that. So he was an Air Force vet, so I think he kind of understood the situation, and he had a little more sympathy for me than some other people might have had. And so when I did get back, I went to work this was probably just before Thanksgiving or so, mid November, and I went back to work, started working for a few weeks, and every day was just I was dragging myself out of bed, and it was such a pain to go into this job that I just didn't see the purpose or the meaning behind it. Like there was a reason that I was doing the job, but it wasn't meaningful to me. And so that's when I wanted to find something that was a little bit more meaningful, something that I enjoyed, and gave me a sense of purpose. So when I started working for my father's company, helping him grow his company was meaningful to me, and that gave me a sense of purpose. And then I decided that I really enjoyed the technology side of things, and that gave me another purpose to be able to go out and help other people build their websites and grow their businesses. And so I wanted to get out and help as many people as I could. And now that I'm selling plugins, I have thousands of websites run the code that I've written for these plugins. And as a matter of fact, I've contributed to WordPress core in the past as well. So if you have a WordPress site, there's some of the code that I've written is on there too. Whether or not you use one of my plugins, but being able to have that sort of impact gives me a deep sense of meaning and purpose that I was just struggling to find in the civilian job that I had prior to, or just after getting back from Afghanistan.
Yeah. So another thing, it seems like you've been, it seems like now you're on a mission to help people, and that's kind of like your goal is to help as many people as you can. And that leads me to your podcast, Drive On, which I know I've listened to several episodes. It's kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on, just to talk about, some of the things that you're doing with that show and how you're trying to impact veterans around you with the things that you've kind of gone through and the people you get to talk to and explain their stories on that show. So tell me a little bit about this podcast, why you started it, and kind of where it's going today.
Yeah, so I started the podcast about a year ago, and when I first started it, I knew nothing about podcasting. I had
Me
been
either. I still don't.
I had been a guest on a couple of podcasts, and I had this, little crappy mic because I knew the built-in mic on your computer isn't really the best, and so I had this little crappy mic, and it really wasn't all that good. And so I went out. I was looking for some advice on what to buy for a microphone, and I got all these different things, and it was so overwhelming. I just pulled the trigger on something that it wasn't too expensive, just in case I decided to not do it anymore after a couple episodes, and it was a little bit overwhelming in the beginning. But the reason why I started the podcast was because I had just heard of way too many service members coming back from deployment and losing their battles to PTSD and other stresses like that from combat, and hearing that we end up losing more people at home to suicide than we do in actual combat was, to me, just unacceptable. It was not something that should be happening. And so I wanted to do a podcast where I could help these service members, these veterans who are struggling with one thing or another, whether it's PTSD, depression, addiction, troubles in their marriage, a whole range of different things. I wanted to be able to talk to these people who maybe have struggled and then found their way out of those struggles, and talk to them so that way maybe their story could resonate with somebody else who might be going through a similar situation. I've talked to people who've turned to yoga and art and photography and the outdoors, getting out and hiking and canoeing and that type of stuff as their coping mechanisms for whatever it is that they were going through. And without those stories, there might be people out there who are just struggling and see no sense of meaning or purpose to life in general. I was at a time when I was struggling to find a sense of meaning and purpose in the job that I had. And that to me is like a minor issue. It's a minor inconvenience in comparison to someone who's struggling to find meaning or purpose in their life in general. And so when you have someone like that, I just, my heart breaks when I hear these stories from people who just see no sense of purpose to them even being here anymore. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Everyone, I truly believe that everyone has a purpose, everyone has a meaning, and you may not have found what that purpose or meaning is. I have family that I love, my wife, my children, and everything, and if I had nothing else, I'd still have them. Even if the job that I do, if I'm not going to even say it because the way 2020 is going, I'm not going to jinx anything. But if my job was to disappear, tomorrow, I'd still have them, and that to me is purpose enough to keep going, and to figure things out and keep going. But there's some people who don't even have that. They don't have the support group, the network of people who care about them and love them. And so, talking to people who have figured that aspect out really helps to get that message out to other people, other veterans who are just struggling to find a sense of purpose and meaning. And what I've found through doing this podcast is that a sense of purpose and meaning is all it takes to get over this hump sometimes, that people are in the funk that they're in. Another guy that I talked to on the podcast, he does these mission trips where he goes down to Mexico and other countries that are less fortunate than we are here in the United States, and they build houses and they build churches and schools and things like that for those communities. And after he's done building these things, he just has an incredible sense of pride, and he's so happy that he's able to help these people. And that's the type of thing that I think people are missing. It doesn't have to be, get on a plane and go fly to some country to build a house, but you have to find something that gives you a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose. And even if it's just running in honor of somebody or doing something like that, it gives you a sense of purpose, and you don't want to let those people down, and so you don't let them down by just driving on, as the name implies, and continuing to do whatever it is that gives you that purpose.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And when I started my podcast, it's been over 3 years ago now, actually longer than that. And I didn't have a whole lot of listeners. I didn't even know if anybody was listening, honestly, because at first I didn't even know how to check stats, and I didn't really care. I was just doing it, put it out there. And it was probably a little after the 1 year mark where it really started to kind of gain momentum. And I don't know what it was. I don't know if the algorithms changed. I really have no idea. I think having guests on was helpful for sure.
Sure.
But having something that you put out there, and even if nobody responds back, because I know with your audience and my audience, you have people that are like you and like me, right? And I never give ratings or reviews. I don't, that's just one thing
Right.
I just don't do, But so it's hard to get that feedback back. So you think nobody's listening, but you never know if you're impacting that one person, and that one person's life is changed because of something you said or something you did. And I'll never forget this past. It was January, so before COVID, but still in 2020, I went to a conference, and it was. Which conference was it? I don't remember, but I went to this conference, and I was walking down the hall, and a guy spotted me, somebody I'd never met before.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "John Rauda," and I looked at him, and he came over and started talking to me about my show, and told me about one of my guests that was on there that made a big difference in his life. And I was like, wow, this is, the guy feels like he knows me. I obviously impacted him, and I had never met him before.
Sure.
And when you get things like that, it gives you encouragement to continue to move forward. And I love what you're doing with your guests, and you have a resources page on Drive On
Mm-hmm.
that I'd love for you to talk about some of the things you have on there, because you have things to help people that could be going through, PTSD, it could be going through depression, suicide, help. You have lots of little things on there. And, what is that page exactly? Driveonpodcast.com, and then there's a link to veterans resources.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So up at the top of the page there, it says veteran resources, and that page, I created that page really as a kind of a one-stop shop for people who are struggling with things like PTSD, addiction, any of the other hot topic issues that people might be having. Just a list of various resources, and some of them are duplicated in terms of, like, there's more than one maybe mental health resource that's on the page. There's more than one addiction resource on the page. Perhaps different resources are out there for different things. But the reason why I do that and try to load that up with as many different resources as I can kind of come across, and not just every resource under the sun, but just the bigger names that I know are going to, have a bigger impact on people. The reason why I do that is because someone might try to maybe they go to the VA for some sort of treatment for whatever, PTSD or something, and the VA doesn't work out for them for one reason or another. And then they get frustrated and they just, well, the heck with it. I must be broken, and I'm not gonna go seek out anything else. But there's other treatment options that are available. There's other places that you can go. There's other things that you can do. And if you give up on yourself that early, then you're never gonna find your way to the help that you need. So I wanted to put out a bunch of different resources. Even if they duplicate, because you might try one and it's not right for you. It's just like, a pair of shoes or a pair of pants or something. You might try them on and they don't look good on you, but they might look good for somebody else. So, try on a different pair and you'll end up finding something that you eventually like. So that's kind of the idea behind that page is to provide a lot of resources for people with the different treatment options that are available.
I think that's great. I mean, I didn't know a whole lot about. I wasn't in the military, so I didn't know a lot about it. My dad, he fought in Vietnam, so he was in the military, but he was out long before I was born, so never really, knew what it was like. And I had a cousin who, he was killed in action as well. So it kind of made me think more about what's going on in our military. And as I've had people on the podcast talking about it, I had no idea that, a lot of soldiers come back and struggle to find work. I had no idea that soldiers came back and suffer depression and have identity crises and things that they don't, they weren't expecting. And those are just things that I didn't know existed. And just having awareness of that is helpful. But not only that, you're also helping people, not just giving awareness to those like me who are ignorant of that, but also giving help for the people that are having it. So I think that's great, and love what you're doing there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And to the people who might be listening, who are in a leadership role, who might want to hire veterans, because that sounds like that's the right thing to do, to give veterans jobs and things like that, and we definitely appreciate those types of opportunities. Just know that there are some issues sometimes that come along with veterans, the things like you were talking about, and being aware of that and conscious of the fact that there could be some sort of issues going on, will help that employer relationship, or manager relationship, to be able to recognize things before they get out of hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but veterans are just like everybody else. They want to be treated just like everybody else. Mm-hmm. And you definitely should honor them and be thankful for their service, but they're an employee just like everybody else, and they want to be treated as such. And I've hired veterans. I have veterans on my team right now. I've had to fire veterans, just to be honest with you. Yeah. Because they're people just like everybody else. And one of the things that I've found with most of the veterans that I've hired, even if they don't have all the experience that I'm looking for, they typically have a discipline that's important to getting the job done, and a sense of camaraderie or teamwork that sometimes you don't see in the tech field. So it's always been refreshing for me.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Scott, man, I really appreciate you coming on the show. Tell people how they can find out more about you and more about your podcast and some of the things that you've been working on.
Yeah, sure. I'm on Twitter a lot at Scott DeLuzio, ScottDeluzio, and the podcast is Drive On Podcast. You can find that at driveonpodcast.com or Drive On Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the typical social channels, and you can subscribe to it anywhere that you listen to podcasts.
All right. And if you guys are, on your podcast app right now, go ahead and look that up. Take a listen to the Drive On Podcast. Leave it a 5-star rating and review, and tell them that I said to do that. All right, Scott. Thanks for coming on the show, man. I really appreciate it. Keep doing the good work.
All right. Thanks for having me, John.
Hope you guys enjoyed that conversation. And don't forget that you can sign up for private internet access for only $3.33 a month. Check it out at geekleader.com/VPN.